Hi, I am doing my first take here on my Miracles of Jesus presentation. Mostly doing this to um, see how long I take and make sure it's between 5 and 7 minutes. Um, so, the miracle that I was assigned was the miracle of the coin in the fish's mouth. That is found in Matthew 17:24 through 27. And I'm just going to read it from the NLT version just to get us started. It says, on their arrival in Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked him, "Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax?" "Yes, he does," Peter replied. Then he went into the house. But before he had a chance to speak, Jesus asked him, "What do you think, Peter? Do kings tax their own people or the people they have conquered?" "They tax the people they have conquered," Peter replied. "Well then," Jesus said, "the citizens are free. However, we don't want to offend them, so go down to the lake and throw in a line. Open the mouth of the first fish you catch, and you will find a large silver coin. Take it and pay the tax for both of us." So that is the passage we are talking about. And the first question up is, who did the miracle? So firstly, that was Jesus. um, Through his supernatural power, he made that happen. But secondly, Simon Peter was an accessory to this miracle. He's the one who physically went out and caught the fish and removed it from its mouth. But Peter would not have been able to do any of this without Jesus' supernatural power. So, who received the miracle? Firstly, I believe this miracle was meant for Peter. Um, the coin itself had enough value to pay the temple tax for both Jesus and Peter, so there was a purpose in that, in paying the tax for both of them. But I believe that the miracle was meant for Peter to experience. Um, he was a mechanism and a tool, but it also required his obedience to manifest this miracle. And we see it at this point in Matthew's gospel. Peter is still referred to as Simon or Simon Peter sometimes. So personally, I think this is just a testament to the fact that he's still learning, he's still actively being taught. Maybe he hasn't fully become Peter yet, if that makes sense. So the fact that Jesus uses him in this instance, and he uses something that Peter knows. He's a fisherman, he knows how to go out and fish. So this is like an ordinary circumstance where Jesus triumphed that and performed the supernatural above that. Um, so yeah, who received the miracle? I would say, firstly, it's meant for Peter, and not only for Peter but for us to learn from that. But secondly, the tax collectors were also part of who the miracle was meant for, because Jesus is trying to pay them. And the Bible doesn't say whether, Peter told them where the coin came from or if they were standing there the whole time. So whether or not the tax collectors were aware of the miracle happening, I think they're a third um, recipient of this miracle. Um, so thirdly, what is the purpose and what did Jesus hope to accomplish? Again, I think the purpose of this miracle was to demonstrate Jesus's miracle working power over the supernatural, or over natural elements. God is also a God of plenty and provision, and by supplying the coin in the fish's mouth, um, he's actually showing that he has dominion over all of creation and natural elements. Um, and as I mentioned earlier, I really think the purpose of this miracle was to show Peter that if he had trust and obedience in what Jesus told him to go do, that he would be part of a miracle happening right before his own eyes. So really, I think it's a lesson for Peter. That he can be a part of something miraculous. And again, because we're reading the Gospels, it's showing us that we are just like the disciples. We have just as much power and authority as the disciples do. So it's a lesson for us as well, that if we just have obedience, trust, and faith, if we listen to what Jesus is asking us to do, we can be part of miracles happening as well. Let's see. Oh, and I did come across this as well in my research, that there's another lesson in this, which speaks to respecting our earthly authority, and living by the laws of the land. Through my research, I found that the annual temple tax was collected from every man aged 20 and above. So this wouldn't be something new to Jesus. At the time of this story, he's at least 30. So he's had the um, responsibility of paying this temple tax at least 10 times. So it's not something new to him. But he's making a point that, let's see, it says that the tax belongs to the king. And in this passage, it says, does the king tax his own sons or the people that he's conquered? So Jesus is making the point that we are sons and daughters of the Most High King. So we shouldn't be taxed. We shouldn't be the ones who have to pay the tax. We are children of the Most High King. Let's see. But he's teaching us to respect authority. He's teaching Peter to respect earthly authority. And the Bible, the passage literally says, so to not offend them, we will pay the tax. So he's showing us that, we have to respect authority, to live by the laws of the land. But at the same time, he's also showcasing how he has power over those natural elements, and we do as well, as extensions of him, as his children, as his living, walking disciples today. But he chose to obey those earthly laws for the sake of not offending them. So what were the results of the miracle? Firstly, I believe Peter was greatly impacted. He was shown his own importance and the ability to take part in this miracle, just as we are able to today as well as children. I was going to say, just as Peter walked on the water for a brief moment, I think it's really meant to speak to Peter on a deeper level, revealing God's power and the power of obedience and his faith and his trust in what Jesus is telling him to do. And also, as a result, the tax collectors were satisfied. They got paid. The coin was enough to pay for both Jesus and Peter. The coin was known as a stater, which was equal to 4 drachmae, or a tetradrachm. So 2 drachmae would pay the tax, and the coin was said to be enough for both of them. So they were satisfied. But again, in my research, I found that usually priests weren't expected to pay the tax. So the fact that the collectors were walking around and approached Jesus about it spoke to the fact that they didn't yet recognize him as a priest or a person of spiritual authority, which was really interesting to me. Just the fact that they asked him for the tax, even though he'd been walking around preaching and teaching already at this time. So the result is obviously they got paid, and hopefully they didn't bother them after that anymore. So let's see, who beyond the person who received the miracle was impacted. Again, I think Peter was the primary recipient, and we are as an extension of that, of hearing and learning this story. The tax collectors also were the recipients of this miracle, whether or not they realized it. And then thirdly, Jesus and his disciples as a group were impacted because hopefully they weren't bothered or asked to pay the tax after that. Let's see. So how does this miracle apply to us today? It really is an illustration that we have inherited the same power and authority to perform miracles or to take part in miracles, just as his disciples did. And really all it takes is obedience, faith, trust, listening, taking a step out and doing what God has asked us to do. We can be a part of those miracles as well. Let's see. And, again, there's the lesson of submitting to our earthly authority, even while recognizing that we are inheritors of God's kingdom and his power over those same circumstances that we choose to submit to. So it is a deeper spiritual lesson for us. Like, we're children of God, but we should still obey the laws of the land while we're here. Let's see. Lastly, what other instances in the Bible do we see the same type of miracle? So I believe, this could be categorized as a miracle of provision and a miracle of power over natural elements. So I picked up 3 different ones that really stood out to me. Firstly, the miracle of feeding the multitude. That is a miracle over power over natural elements. We see it in Matthew 14, we see it in Mark 6, Luke 9, and John 6. He was able to turn a young boy's meager lunch into enough to feed 5,000 men, not counting women and children, and there were still 12 baskets left over of partial pieces. So that shows his power over natural elements, being able to replicate and provide and give provision to the people around him. Secondly, one of my favorites, Luke 5, 4 through 11, where Jesus tells Peter and his companions to cast their nets over to the side of the boat, even though they'd been fishing all night and hadn't caught anything. And when they obeyed and cast their nets, they were soon so overflowing and so heavy that even a second boat was about to sink. That is just so amazing to me. So again, I think this really relates to the miracle of the coin in the fish's mouth, because it's Peter, because it's dealing with fishing, which would have been a normal thing for them. They lived their whole lives as fishermen and were experts in this. And, Peter had every right to be like, no, I know better. But he's literally being taught a lesson that just because he might be an expert on something, he still needs to practice his faith and his trust in his leader, in Jesus, and that Jesus can make something miraculous happen through Peter. I just love that one. So again, that second one is where he's demonstrating his power over the natural elements. And thirdly, the third similar miracle would be found in Matthew 8, 23 through 27, where Jesus is sleeping on a boat and the disciples are up and they're panicking over the storm that they're sailing through. And Jesus woke up and promptly rebuked the wind and the waves, and it just suddenly came a calm. And again, I see this as a miraculous and powerful demonstration of God's ability to control the natural elements and make the wind and the waves bow to them. That's really what has stood out to me in studying this miracle, the coin in the fish's mouth. That, God can take the ordinary and turn it into something extraordinary and miraculous. That he has the power over natural elements. He is the God of provision, and all we need to do as I'm losing the word, but as his children, as we've inherited his power as his children, as in believers in Christ as well. So we can be part of miraculous instances and miracles if we just practice our obedience and faith and trust. So that's really what I learned through this, and I really love that Jesus uses the ordinary, and I love that we can rely on Peter to be sort of a realistic example of someone who might be a little harder to believe, and he might need some convincing sometimes. I really enjoyed studying this lesson, and thanks for listening.